Are not only morally justifiable, but they have the potential to address long-standing racial disparities and inequality.
The equivocal number from the 1860s for 40 acres today is $200 million for each and every African American.
California Democrats applauding the move that takes them one step closer to giving more than $1 million to each Black resident, despite activists saying it's still not enough. GOP presidential candidate Larry Elder ran for governor of California, and he joins us now. Larry, we've been talking about this story all morning long. Is this for real? Could this really happen? Could they really give reparations to Black people in California?
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for having me. That's kind of the problem, isn't it? I ran for governor. I'm familiar with the state budget. It is $300 billion. This would be $600 billion, give or take, twice what the state budget is. There is a $20 billion deficit, and there's a $1.5 trillion, T as in Tyrannosaurus, $1.5 trillion unfunded pension liability. From where is the money going to come? They're going to have to tax people. And by the way, most people in California aren't even white. They're people of color, even if you accept the premise here. Now, reparations is the extraction of money from people who were never slave owners to be given to people who were never slaves. And California was admitted as a free state. So what the task force says is, doesn't matter. It's about mass incarceration, redlining, and over-policing. Okay, that allegedly explains the racial gap. Really? How do you explain then the fact that the Japanese Americans have a higher household income than whites do, even though in California there were laws that forbade Japanese from owning farmland? How do you explain the fact that Chinese Americans have a higher household income than do white Americans when there were laws in the Bay Area that forbade Chinese from participating in the laundry business? There are lots of people who are discriminated against. You want to assign the racial gap to all of that stuff? The real gap, Rachel, that they don't talk about is a fatherlessness gap. Yes. When I was a kid, virtually every one of my friends had a mother and a father in the home. Now that is rare. 70% of Black kids now enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. You cannot tell me that there's more racism today than it was back in 1952 when I was born.
Yeah, no one wants to talk about fatherlessness. No one wants to talk about the government's complicity in encouraging these kinds of arrangements and the lack of family formation. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Really quick, what is the message that this sends to Black children in California?
It says that you are a victim, and this is all about buying votes. They don't care whether or not their money is there. What they want is for Black people to pull that lever for Democrats like lemons, because after all, Democrats are more likely to support reparations than Republicans. One more thing, one more discrepancy, 75%, Rachel, of Black boys in California cannot read at grade proficiency. 85% of Blacks in California cannot do math at grade proficiency, even though we're spending more money K through 12 than ever before. We ought to be talking about those kinds of racial disparities, but they're not.
Yeah, amen to that.
Why Buddy ain't got no neck? I'm starting off like that, Buddy. Huh?
No, I was like, oh God, I know somebody gonna say something about him not having the neck.
Buddy ain't got no neck, man. But okay, so Breakdown Friday, Joseph Ward, PC, Patrick Irvin. We here to break down. We're talking about reparations this Friday. So, as you can see in the clip, the proposal to give Black people, are they saying Black people or people of color?
Nah, this is supposedly strictly Black people, direct descendants of slaves, supposedly.
Well, because it sounded like I was hearing like different language, like people of color and African Americans or whatever.
Were.
Okay, yeah. So let's assume 1.2 million to every Black person in the state of California. So it's the proposal has been approved to be put forth, to be voted on, to be actually put into law to give all of the Black people in California their $1.2 million. So we want to talk about reparations overall. Like what should real reparations look like from Black people, for Black people? But also on the other end, because you know we come from the self-sufficiency standpoint. If they do get the money, or how do we repair the things that we've done, or how do we make sure that we're in a good position to uplift and rearrange and recreate the communities and things that we need for ourselves? Because you know, me and PC was getting into a conversation, starting to get into the conversation a bit earlier. So to me, you know, looking at it from both sides, to me, on the side of California giving reparations, this sounds like hush money to me. So y'all tell me, do I feel like that by myself? Does it sound like hush money being given?
No, it don't sound like hush money being given to me, because ain't no money gonna be given.
I mean, before we get to you jumping ahead, Pat. Okay. Don't be actually thinking like you're supposed to think. You jumping ahead, because we're gonna get to that.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, assuming, let's go with the mindset of, hey, it could get passed. In that mindset, if the people actually do get the money, what do you think it has that hush money aura around it?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, if black people ever actually get reparations, it's definitely gonna come with the string attached of shut the fuck up from now on. We don't want to hear no more shit about it. Absolutely. And that's not even like, that's actually kind of what reparations is supposed to be for. We're going to make things better for you, or we're going to do what we can to repair the situation.
Right.
And once the situation is repaired, you can stop holding it over our head.
Right. And so that's where I'm coming from with this, because reparations is to repair what has happened due to the enslavement of African, or now black people in America, right? So we're going to repair what happened. So we're talking about, what was the whole purpose of slavery? To acquire land, power, wealth, and resources. That was the whole purpose of slavery: land, power, wealth, and resources, right? So we're going to repair what we did to you all in this specific state of California, but we're going to give you $1.2 million.
Per person.
To be quiet, because now if we give you this 1.2, you can't talk about racism no more. That's how I'm feeling about it. What you think, PC?
No, that's what it is. And like Pat said, that's what it's supposed to be. But if you talk about just this particular, finding, because this is just one aspect of reparations, then yeah, it's money to basically shut down the conversation about the deficit that racism created. So yeah, on that perspective, I don't want to get too far ahead. So, but when you analyze what was taken from black people, and I heard Larry Elder, by the way,
We're gonna get
that
him.
dude.
We're gonna get to him. Being disingenuous.
Well, to say things like California was a free state, and to say things like nobody in California was a slave, or nobody was a slave owner, is extremely disingenuous when you consider the Western expansion. But one of the biggest reasons for the Western expansion was to create states that were free of black people, and to create empires of white supremacy. So it was an extension of white supremacy. It's one of the reasons why you have Mount Rushmore, which is a testimony to white supremacy and eminent domain. So, yeah, that I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah, it's definitely hush money.
Yeah, we're gonna get to Larry Elder. We're gonna get to him, but overall, it's about reparations, because once again, repairing what happened. what happened? Black people were used as free labor to build this country. Black people experienced every inhumane thing you can imagine and things you probably can't even imagine, whether it was in the state of California or in the state of Mississippi. I know some people like to argue that the slavery in California was better than the slavery in Mississippi. Slavery is slavery. You wouldn't want neither one of them, right? So it looked like to me, hey man, $1.2 million is a slap in the face. I know I've had conversations with people like, man, should I take that? I think that's a good thing. We could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this. But you're going to give a group of people $1.2 million who not codified. Because once again, it's chess. This is chess, not checkers. We already know we're not codified. They already know we're not unified.
Mhm.
So that 1.2 mil really gonna come back.
Well, I mean, one thing for sure, right? Like, because like Pat said, I don't think it's going to go past the referendum stage. This
Oh
is
yeah,
going to be
it's not.
and until a point where the money's pretty much worthless, or we get stagnant into some type of digital currency. But slavery wasn't the only reason Black people needed reparations. The damage to Black people, the majority of the damage that happened to Black people was post-slavery, when the wealth was actually redistributed in this country or locked in this country. There were towns that Black people, we already know that Black people established townships during the Jim Crow era that were either flooded, burned down, or bypassed. We also know that there's policies of benign neglect that took place. We also know that California was still one of the most racist places in this country. People forget about all the riots of the 60s that took place in California, the burning down of Central Avenue in California, the Watts riots that took place in Los Angeles. So what I'm saying is slavery wasn't the only reason Black people are asking for what they deserve in terms of reparations. You had a lot of things systemically that were put in place that created unfair conditions for Black people to live in. You destroyed the the esteem of the Black community, destroyed the image of the Black community. You I mean, when I say you, I'm talking about the apparatus that we call America. There were Black people. I mean, let's the crack cocaine epidemic alone, where the CIA acknowledges that they distributed large sums and quantities of drugs to fuel wars in Central America to buy weapons for Iran. I mean, the Iran Contras. So, there was a lot of different stipulations as to why Black people in California should be receiving reparations. Now, what are they going to do with them? That's another part of the conversation that we have to address. But um, that's just when I hear people make the argument about, well, I wasn't a slave and nobody else was a slave owner. Yeah, but we all know that the you know institutional wealth, generational wealth was created. Institutional wealth was created, and certain people were robbed of their access to that wealth. And by the way, majority of Black people in this country were not invited. We were stolen. So,
Well, that's the thing. Like one of the pieces Larry Elder was saying, well, you're trying to make people today pay for what people yesterday did, but people today benefit from what people did yesterday.
well, in
Like
addition,
you don't have the wealth you have today if it wasn't for slavery yesterday. What part of that do you not get?
well, even the people that because he's talking about a lot of people of color. Okay, that and he did throw that term around,
Of
who
course.
make up the majority of California. Well, when you come to this country, you come to the country for the benefits, and by default, you also inherit the burdens of that. You don't just get one; it's a whole pie. You have to take the good with the bad. Um, so if you came to this country to benefit, off of the ill-gotten gains of white supremacy, then you also should be held accountable when they have to pay up. And so, those types of arguments is good for the unqualified listener, but Larry Elder needs to, him and that reporter need to go back to school, because they ain't dealing with no lightweights over here.
Well, I think one of the things that everybody's good at doing, but in particular the people at Fox, is changing the discussion, like changing the context and the parameters of what's being talked about. While he did mention, I forget whether it was him or her, mentioned that the commission stated that these reports or this commission for reparation wasn't about slavery. It was about all of the other things. Right after they mentioned that, they went right back to harping on the slavery.
Mhm.
And that's one of the interesting things that we see happening time and time again with people that are in opposition, is that they want to keep the argument focused on a particular period of time, and they want to ignore everything outside of that period of time. Like you said, PC, there were a lot of other things that happened, and I'm in agreement with you. I think what happened post slavery is actually worse than what happened during slavery, in terms of our ability to grow and develop as a community and to repair some of the things that we went through during slavery. People, it's easy to forget because it's seldom talked about. We came out of slavery in a relatively good place, comparably speaking to what we had just went through. We had a community intact. We actually had people crisscrossing the nation looking for each other, which shows lines of communications being developed, resources
Yeah.
being developed, family structures and communities being still intact, that people were actually finding and reestablishing families, cities, bonds, communities. All of these things coming out of slavery were there. And what happened after that is the destruction. So I agree with the way you worded it in terms of what happened after slavery, and the commission talks about what happened after slavery. But those are conversations that we seldom get into because everybody wants to pigeonhole the conversation into this talk about slavery, during which it becomes very easy to lead ill-informed or misinformed people astray by saying, well, you were never a slave, so how did slavery negatively impact your life? Well, if all we talking about is an institution that allegedly died 100+ years ago, then that seems like a valid question.
Right, but right, if it would have died, if it would have died out, if all of the discrimination, the racism, if everything would have died, then the conversation would be a
But
bit
see,
different. You
you
would still
adding
have some
stuff in,
repairing to do.
Joe.
I'm thinking. I'm
Yeah,
doing a
you
logical
keep
thing.
you keep adding in discrimination and all of that. No, slavery.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah, the irony behind
Yeah.
Joe, like, yeah.
because the funny, it's not even funny, but black people came out of slavery as the skilled labor.
Mm-hmm.
They were the
White people were
community.
afraid.
Black people proved who built this country by when they were given nothing, going out and then creating whole townships. You had 60 townships in Oklahoma alone, not just Black Wall Street. You had townships that were in moving all throughout the country. Chicago, Illinois was founded by Black people. One can say Los Angeles, even though the California basin and going all the way up to the top of the West Coast was all designed for white supremacy, to be an exclusive area. Black people still built, in those areas. And Black